You're watching WION World is One. I'm Shivangi Shukla. In the next 30 minutes, I'll take you through all the top stories on WION Speed News. Colombia students took to the streets of the capital, Bogota, to demand the dismantling of the anti-riot police unit. Protests are the latest in a series that began as an anti-corruption protest and have grown to mass protests in response to violent police repression. Students protested demanding that the government of President Iván Duque provides more resources for education and against corruption. Hundreds of students camped out on University Plaza in Barcelona, blocking adjoining streets and calling for Catalan independence. Students had begun their strike on October 30th and plan to occupy the area indefinitely. A large group of the students also marched through the streets outside the regional government headquarters. The students say they have now been forced to strike since the Spanish government has refused to sit and talk with Catalan leaders. Hundreds of Catalan separatists marched in central Barcelona to demand the release of jailed leaders and for Catalan independence. The protesters cut off traffic and demonstrated in front of the headquarters of the pro-union centre-right party and the Conservative People's Party. They called for the Spanish caretaker Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez to negotiate with the regional government of Catalonia. Demonstrations, however, remained peaceful as police and riot gear were stationed at the nearby streets. Argentines marched through the streets of Buenos Aires into the country offices of the International Monetary Fund in the first major protest since Alberto Fernandez beat right-leaning Mauricio Macri in the general election. Fernandez pledged to lead the country in a new direction amid a difficult domestic backdrop. But protesters seem to have little patience. Fernandez will take over negotiations with creditors, including the IMF, about restructuring more than $100 billion in sovereign debt. The protests in Lebanon have refused to die down despite Prime Minister Saad Hariri is stepping down. Protesters have said that they are part of a revolution and do not fear violence in order to bring about a change. This has left the security forces struggling to open roads in Beirut. Protesters have been sitting on the roads as part of their civil disobedience campaign in support of the anti-government protests. On the day that the UK was due to have left the European Union, Brexiteers demonstrated outside Parliament in protest at the delay in Britain's departure. Several hundred Leave supporters marched around Westminster, denouncing what they described as lawmakers' delaying tactics. The Halloween Brexit had to be delayed after the British lawmakers disapproved the deal brokered by Prime Minister Boris Johnson with the European Union. Britain is now headed towards an early election on December 12th in a bid to end the Brexit deadlock. UK's opposition leader Jeremy Corbyn has launched the election campaign for his Labour Party. He said that he was launching the most ambitious and radical campaign Britain had ever seen. Corbyn addressed a crowd of cheering supporters in London and promised to get Brexit sorted within 6 months if elected to power. The elections have been scheduled for December 12th as the latest effort to end the Brexit deadlock. The The U.S. House of Representatives has approved the resolution formalizing the impeachment investigation against President Trump. The House voted in favor with 232 ayes to 196 noes. Passing of the rules was opposed by all the Republicans, who are joined by 2 Democratic defectors. The vote laid down the ground rules for all the proceedings related to the impeachment, from all the closed-door interviews with witnesses to public hearings, and ultimately to possible votes on whether to recommend Trump's removal from office. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has condemned North Korea for firing projectiles. As per the Japanese authorities, North Korea fired what appear to be ballistic missiles into the sea between Korean Peninsula and Japan. South Korea's Joint Chief of Staff said that the 2 unidentified projectiles had been fired from the South Pyongan province. North Korea has fired several new missile designs this year, irking the Japanese and South Koreans. China's ruling Communist Party is planning to strengthen laws regarding Hong Kong in the name of national security. A statement to such effect was issued at the end of major meetings of the party's Central Committee led by President Xi Jinping. The party said that in an effort to maintain the territory's prosperity and stability, it will embark on a project to establish and strengthen a legal system and enforcement mechanism for safeguarding national security in Hong Kong. In a televised address to the nation amid continued protest, Iraqi president has said that the Prime Minister Abdul Mahdi has been agreeing and has agreed to step down. Resignation would come only if any other alternative to the post is agreed upon. Saleh also vowed to conduct fresh parliamentary elections once a new electoral law is passed and a new election commission is established. He also urged for these institutions to work hard towards confining weapons only into the hands of the state forces and not the outlaw parties. German Chancellor Angela Merkel arrived in New Delhi for a 3-day visit to strengthen bilateral ties and bolster strategic and economic cooperation. Merkel was welcomed by Junior Minister in Indian Prime Minister's office, Jitendra Singh, upon arrival. Merkel and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi are expected to discuss trade, investment, regional security and climate change. U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper welcomed his Australian counterpart, Linda Reynolds, to the Pentagon on a first visit to the United States. Esper praised the many decades of mateship between the U.S. and Australia. Reynolds said that they discussed a shared work program they have developed in August and talked about shared deployments globally and in the Indo-Pacific. Firefighters battled several active wildfires in California but appear to make headway against a number of major blazes that have forced mass evacuations and power cuts. 2 fast-moving infernos broke out in the southern part of the state, burning several homes and forcing people to flee. The National Weather Service said that although the warnings would remain in effect for much of Los Angeles and Ventura counties, conditions have improved. A massive fire erupted in an industrial building filled with wooden pallets in southern Los Angeles in California. Aerial video showed firefighters battling the stubborn fire that could be seen miles away. However, no injuries were reported in this incident.
35 might have to take inventory, so that's 5, and if there's one on the other side, that's going to be 6 to start to see this. And I believe one of our staffers at the studio was hiking, actually, and saw this fire start with an explosion. So just right off of Alameda and about southern there.
State of Baja California in northwestern Mexico recorded several fires after a first wave was stifled earlier this week. So far, no deaths or injuries have been reported from the new fires. Given the continuity of fires, the authorities suspended classes at all educational levels in this region. Since last week, there had been fires in the area which forced groups of inhabitants to move to shelters to protect themselves. Climate change activists protested in Berlin in support of the German families who filed a lawsuit against Chancellor Angela Merkel's government for not doing enough to tackle climate change. Lawsuit is the first attempt in Germany to hold authorities legally accountable for pledges they have made to reduce greenhouse emissions. The families argued that their farms were already suffering from the effects of global warming, for which they have blamed the whole German society. Germany has said that it will miss its 2020 goal, but that it's now concentrating on a more ambitious target of cutting emissions by 55% by 2030. Spain has offered to host the United Nations COP25 Climate Change Summit in Madrid following Chile's withdrawal as the host and raging street protests in the South American nation. Chilean President Sebastián Pinera has said that Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez had offered to host the summit in Spain on the same day as previously scheduled between December 2nd and December 13th. The UN has not responded to the development so far. Nobel laureates are in fact deeming it unrealistic to move to another planet and urged people to protect the planet Earth instead. Top scientists from around the world are having in-depth discussions on science and the common destiny of humanity at the ongoing Second World Laureates Forum in Shanghai. During an interview, 2019 Nobel laureate in physics Michael Mayer and 2013 Nobel laureate in chemistry Michael Levitt sat down together to talk about the possibility of human beings moving to another planet. Mexico City was transformed with altars, lights and performances ahead of the Day of the Dead. The festival is a Mexican holiday celebrating loved ones who passed away. The festival is observed in the central and southern regions of South America. The level of imagination among revelers in London has touched new heights this Halloween. The UK's Prime Minister announced in November that he would rather be dead in a ditch than ask for a delay to the UK leaving the EU by October 31st. Playing on Boris' broken promise, a party-goer dressed himself up as the Prime Minister. He resurrected from the dead. A London venue had planned to celebrate Brexit as part of an immersive War of the Worlds experience organised by creative director of the Dominique Wong. Alaskan coastal brown bears and polar bear got pumpkins to play with and eat at the Brookfield Zoo to celebrate a snowy Halloween. This was the snowiest Halloween in Chicago's history, with about 3 inches of snow. The snow forced the cancellation of more than 200 flights at Chicago's international airports.